Well, hello everybody. Can everybody hear okay? Fine. You know, public conversations are, in my experience, and I've done quite a lot of them, they're very difficult because conversation should, by definition, be private. And having to talk and converse in public is really quite tricky. And I think it's very important that they shouldn't be scripted. No notes, just one little note. And we want to be relaxed and informal. It's not a lecture. And above all, we've been arguing for the past week as to who should say what. And I kept telling Marco that he should be talking because he's the artist. He's got the exhibition downstairs, and he should be the central focal point. And I've been thinking about Mark Rothko, talking about Mark Rothko, writing about Mark Rothko for a very large chunk of my adult life. And I think it's time for me to step aside as an art historian and instead hand the laurels and, in a sense, the mic to Marco, my good friend. And I should say something a bit more personal. I was very lucky because when quite a famous artist in Brazil called Iberê Camargo, he left a foundation with quite a lot of money and a very beautiful building which was being built by the Portuguese architect Álvaro Siza in Porto Alegre, which was in the far south of Brazil, the capital of Rio Grande do Sul. And they asked me there, out of the blue, to advise on how to do a catalogue raisonné of Iberê Camargo's work. So I said, yes, great, fine, I'd love to come. I've never been to Brazil. I love the idea, and I think the food's going to be great, and the weather should be good, and they invited me down. There's a rather interesting point here, because I only know two words of Portuguese, obrigado, obrigada. And we were talking quite frantically before I left to fly to Rio and Brazil, and then Porto Alegre. And then the day before I left London, I was packing in a hurry, and I got an email from the main person down at the Camargo Foundation, and she said, would you give a talk at the local museum? And I said, yes, of course, I'm delighted to, because we were paying my way there, paying a hotel, the flights and all that. And I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And of course, no prizes for guessing what it was. It was the great Mark Rothko. But the tale has a sting to it, because the very day I was about to leave, she said, oh, we finalised the schedule for the talk, and it's in the museum of Porto Alegre, and you'll start talking at 10 o'clock, and we'll take a 1 hour break for lunch at 1 o'clock till 2, and you'll finish at 6 o'clock. So I said, there must be something lost in translation here, because I can't talk for 6 to 8 hours alone on Mark Rothko. But no, they wanted me to talk for 6 to 8 hours. We had a lunch, had a bottle of wine, and kept on talking. And the funny thing was, I said to myself, no notes, can't have notes, can't script it, just images. So here we are, with Marco, whom I've known for almost a decade now. He's got a lovely show downstairs. And the thing about Marco is I met you on my second trip to Brazil, in Sao Paulo. And it turned out, by sheer coincidence, that Marco was, of course, a great fan of Marcus Rothkovich. And we bonded on that, but also I used to say, well, I don't want to talk about Rothko, Marco. Because I do Rothko all the time, you see. I'd rather talk about Churrascarias and Brazilian weather and places and things like that. But nevertheless, we got on very well. And we met again in New York in the winter of 2013?
13.
I think it was. And you were staying in a very nice apartment which belonged to one of the trustees of a museum there?
Collector.
That's it.
Yes.
So he had this lovely apartment, and I'm telling you this as absolute gospel. He had this lovely apartment, high-rise apartment. I said, oh, this is fantastic. It's better than my hotel room. And it's had beautiful art and everything. And there was a balcony. So I said, oh, let's take a look out at the balcony, you see. It's quite high up, like 20th floor, something like that. And we looked out of the balcony. And I said, Marco, do you know what we're looking at? And he said, no, what? He said 69th Street. And I said, well, if you look very carefully down there, that's 157 East 69th Street. And that was exactly where Mark Rothko moved, if I think my memory's right, in 1964, just as he was beginning the commission for the great chapel in Houston. And it was a converted, very big coach house. I think at some point it became a fire station even, I don't know. It has had a mixed history, I don't know. But it's a very impressive building, sort of like a very late 19th century building, and it was large enough for him to get a sense of the scale of the great murals which he was going to do that year, starting that summer, for the chapel in Houston, which became the Rothko Chapel, and opened in 1971. So I'm not too certain it was a god, but there is certainly a plan. There's some kind of plan to life, because the sheer coincidence of Marco staying in this apartment, looking out the window, and I said, look, that's Rothko's studio down there. I just thought it was amazing. But what I would like to do is, we're still undecided whether we're going to talk about mark, colour, or whatever. But I think colour's very central. And I just wanted to begin with this before handing the mic, as it were, over to Marco. Sometimes people ask me, what's my favourite Rothko painting? And it's one of those really dumb questions. It's like, you know, who's your favourite artist, or who's your favourite pop singer, or something like that. And you can't, it's impossible, you know, given the fact that Rothko began his great abstractions in 1950 and continued pretty much up until his death in February of 1970. There's 400 odd wonderful paintings by Rothko. Some are better than others. Oh, you know, all artists have good days, not so good days, and great days. It's very hard to pick out of those 400 or so paintings one particular work. But if I was forced to give a single work as an answer, then somehow it has to be the work called Homage to Matisse. And of course none of these fantastic paintings will reproduce properly. We're just looking at an image of them, and it's not the same, because Rothko emphasized the materiality as well as the spirituality of his work. But Homage to Matisse is interesting because it's virtually the only classic painting. We call these the classic abstractions from 1950 onwards. It's the only classic painting, as far as I know, to which Rothko very, very definitely gave a title. And many of the titles were assigned by his dealer, Sidney Janis, and then later, even worse, by the Marlborough Gallery. But this we know, Rothko titled. And Henri Matisse, the preeminent French colorist of the century, Matisse died on the 3rd of November 1954. So I reckon when I was trying to sequence within each year the works and when they were done, and sometimes it's impossible, they just had to be put in an orderly kind of fashion. But I was somehow convinced that given that Matisse died on the 3rd of November, Homage to Matisse, which is a very, very carefully engineered work, complex, glowing, dramatic, and also crucially elegant. This is a memorial painting, and yet it blazes. That's a wonderful thing. You've got that terrific contrast of very deep indigo blue and glowing gold. So it's an elegy, and in a way, to me, it's one of the most iconic of all Rothko's paintings. And the last point I want to say is to try to contextualize art, because, okay, art is something up on the wall, but I'm always reminding people it's also something in the real world. It's a material thing. And I remember in New York again when I was trying to view every single painting that went into that book there. And as now, you know, it's 850 canvases, give or take one or two, but I remember going to see Homage to Matisse, and it was in one of those very big warehouses down on the waterfront in Chelsea. Somehow I think it was called the Eagle Warehouse. Does that make any sense? I don't know. Something like that. And it was typical, you know, downtown grimy New York, and the warehouse was industrial and noisy and, you know, really sort of grainy. And I went up in the elevator and I walked through, and then suddenly there's this glowing, transcendent icon. And it's metaphorically speaking, it was a diamond in the proverbial dung heap. And it shone, and it was there, and it was just fabulous. And I'm not going to say any more, because famously Rothko said, silence is so accurate. And it's your chance, Mark, to begin telling me why Rothko, and tell me about your art, and tell me what you think about Rothko.
Should I be silent?
Yeah. It's accurate.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank very much Farida and Rothko Center, and Kate and everybody here, David, my great friend. It's for me, it's something really a great homage. I never imagined to be here. It was something that I could never dream about it. And I don't know why Rothko has been so important for me. Something that's it's a kind of a spirit, like Hamlet, you know. We try to get away from him, and he reappears as a ghost in my entire life, you know. As an artist, he's so important and so great. The closer you get, he's a kind of a black hole that, you know, that might eat you. But so you have to have the proper distance, and at the same time, the more you try to get away from him, I'm here. You see, that's so funny, you know. And when David started, we were invited by the center to talk about my work, and David gave this amazing title, "Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue?" Right? And well, this is, we will see, it's the title of a very famous painting from Barnett Newman. And so I said, oh, what is David doing again, making some kind of a joke, right? Because we're supposed to talk about my work and most of all about Rothko, right? And at the end, you know what happened? This is exactly red, yellow, and blue, right?
Yeah.
This is, you know, Rothko again. Rothko's ghost reappears and beat Barnett Newman, you know.
Well, the thing about Barnett Newman, he said, why put a mortgage on these colours, red, yellow, and blue? But you know, I think he had in mind colour field painting, because when he said that in the late 60s, one of the movements that succeeded what I call APEX. Right? I don't know, everyone should know that I copyrighted this abbreviation. I've been talking about abstract expressionism for so long that it's such a mouthful, abstract expressionism, that I said, well, let's call it ABEX, and put a little copyright mark, and I posted a letter to myself with that in it, and I got that. So ABEX, when I talk about ABEX, I'm talking about abstract expressionism. I think Newman was responding to colour field painting, because he saw colour field painting, influenced by Greenberg, obviously, as an art of pure formalism. And for Newman, Rothko, Clifford Stone, Motherwell, it wasn't just colour. This is a key thing. When Duncan Phillips, of the Phillips Collection in Washington, said, "Are you primarily concerned with colour?" Rothko replied, "No, not colour, measures."
Exactly.
And this is absolutely crucial, because Newman's saying that people like Kenneth Nolan or Morris Lewis, they're just interested in the form of colour, flat, out on the canvas, red, yellow, blue, or whatever. But when you move back to Abbeck's, you're dealing with colour in a much more numinous sense. It's not just the form, it's not just the primary. Its colour is about mood, and it's about emotion. And I've said this once and I'll say it again. Colour is probably one of the most instantly tangible things in the world. I mean, just imagine a world without colour. And here I have to digress, and it may be a sensitive point, but in that great film, Schindler's List, it's filmed in black and white, and it's filmed in Krakow, but there is just one point of colour in it, and that's Gull in red. And that's colour in a black world, a world of absolute darkness. And colour strikes to the heart of things in a way that only music can. I mean, I can be in tears listening to music. And Rothko said people who see his paintings have the same religious, spiritual experience as he did when he painted them and break down and cry. That's probably true, but colour has that ability to really hit you in a way that nothing else in life does. So, was it the emotive quality of Rothko's colour that drew you to him?
It's funny because, maybe Rothko, we're going to see it later, but Rothko really got the sense of color as emotion. And the first man to say it expressly was Matisse. So he was able to go beyond words. That's why we have to be silent, because when there is such a painting that cannot be described, and exactly when you see what color is this? Is it what kind of blue is it? Color is about relationships and measures, and all these relationships, they change all the time, and that's what is so fascinating about it. Therefore, maybe it would be better that we should go on, and maybe you could tell us the relationship between this painting and Bonnard, right?
Yeah, I think we'll leave that to the end, because what I want to really hear is your work. Bonnard, I missed the Bonnard show at the Tate in London, because in London I'm a hermit, and I'm glued to a Mac. I go to the gym, I go to the supermarket, and that's it. I have no life beyond that. And I work all day long, and the Tate had a very good Bonnard show, but I missed it. But another reason why I missed it, Marco, was that quite a while ago, Fred and I decided on the spur of the moment, it was Easter time, I think it must have been about 12, 14 years ago, I said, let's go to Paris. So we got a ferry ticket, and we took a Honda on the car to Paris, and I said, well, why are we going? I said, don't you know why? There's two great artists who have got exhibitions on in Paris. One is incredibly wonderful artist, and one of my heroes, and that's Ingres. Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, the great French academician of the 19th century. And there's something fascinating about Ingres, because I was amazed. We got straight into the Louvre, we didn't have to queue up. We got a ticket, there weren't great crowds or halls of artists from China or wherever, tourists come from, wasn't that? And they were open late. So we went in to see the Garaude show, it was a huge retrospective, on about 7:30 at night. And what was interesting about Ingres, and this is what I get on to you, Mark, because I don't fall asleep yet. Angers is always thought of as a master of line. And since the Renaissance, there's been a division between colour and line. On the one hand, colore, colour, and disegno, Italian for drawing and line. Well, what was really fascinating about Angers is that he was a classicist, and he was an incredible draftsman, and his drawings are absolutely amazing. The family portraits are like precise photographs, literally reduced to line. But what became very apparent in the Angers retrospective, and it was huge, the Louvre pulled out all stops, like 200 works. Angers was a closet colorist.
Great.
And he was a closet sensualist. And you look at some of them, like the Jupiter and Thetis,
yes,
from the Musée Gourmet, in Aix-en-Provence. Yeah. It's outrageously sensuous because the colours are this sort of sensuous silk blues and a plum kind of pink. And it's quite obvious that Angers was trying to hold back colour through the force of line. And he's a testament to the fact that line and colour don't have to be perennial enemies.
Exactly.
They can be good bedfellows.
Exactly. Exactly.
But the second show we saw on that April trip at Easter to Paris was Bonnard at the Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris. And it was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. I mean, with the exception of the show I did in 1996 at the Menil for the 25th anniversary of the Rothko Chapel, which I think was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. I'm big joking now, but it was a very good show, I have to say that. The Bonnard show at the Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris was stunning. Wall after wall, room after room of sheer glowing light. And there, I thought that Bonnard was, in a way, as great as Matisse. And there's no question that Matisse influenced Rothko, obviously, we know that. Homage to Matisse, the Red Studio you talked about. But, Bonnard died in 47, and I think that year, or maybe it was the next year, MoMA, M-O-M-A, Museum of Modern Art in New York, it put on a great memorial show. And it was widely written up in the press. And that was the very moment when Rothko was, as he said, pulverizing the familiar identity of things, pulverizing it into vaporous light and colour. And the sense of atmosphere that you get in a Bonnard like that, and also the window motif. It's very, very, very influential, I think, for Rothko's art.
Yes, of course. It's amazing, even the structure and there's two interesting things when you think when I didn't know that you liked Ingres that much, but as a matter of fact, there was this kind of dispute between Ingres and Delacroix. And as a matter of fact, Delacroix was a hero of color. But honestly, I think, for myself, that Ingres is much more of a colorist, and he has a sensuality that the same that Rothko he could conquer with his paintings. Remember when he says that, "Oh, I'm not a metaphysical painter. I want the sensuality of things," right? And at the same time, Ingres was searching always the perfect form, but at the same time he was able to paint in such a way that he could, feel the texture of life in every detail of all his paintings. And the same thing happened with Bonnard. You have this Prussian effect, that everything is kind of always remembering thing that has been very important in your life.
Yeah, and this reminds me, I think it was Rothko, not Newman, who said about Mondrian. He said it was an absolute sensualist, almost licking the paper.
The whiteness, yes.
And you think of Mondrian ultimately as a kind of Dutch Calvinist.
Exactly.
Totally puritanical. But you look at the Mondrian's interesting thing is that Mondrian adjusts things quite a lot. And especially in the later paintings, like Broadway Boogie Woogie, he's exactly adjusted, calibrated, where the red, yellow, and blue.
Exactly, yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the white.
And the white, of course, is very important. So I think this, this separation between colore, colour, and disegno, design, is a false one.
It is a dispute, a false. I think it has to do much more about politics. I mean, who was more powerful at the moment? For example, Rubens or Poussin, Michelangelo. Look at Michelangelo. He was a great drawer, but at the same time a great painter as well. You see, and the same thing happened with Picasso and Matisse. You know, this is or Pollock and Rothko. There's also always this kind of dispute of what is better, design, disegno, colore. But as a matter of fact, if you are a good painter, if you pretend to be a good one, you have to deal with both of it, you know.
And you have to deal with placement.
Right, and measures of colors and of lines, you know.
Measures, I'm going to say something, I'm going to coin this, measures are where colour meets line.
Exactly.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
Measures are where colour meets line. That's interesting.
And there's a difference between scale and the size of things. You might have something very, small of size with a big scale. You know?
Yes, absolutely. It's you talk about size, and size is a physical measurement. It's something you can do with a tape measure, centimetres, inches. But scale is the human experience of size.
Exactly.
So you can get a little person who seems big, and a big person who seems like a runt, a dwarf. It's how you perceive things, you know. And Rothko was definitely totally preoccupied with a sense of what he called intimate scale. And he associated intimate scale with the human presence. Now, what about the joy of life?
I discovered this very strange thing. Because I teach like for 20 years, you know, sometimes we keep repeating the same images again and again and again. And when I was, talking about this painting, I just discovered that at the back of this wonderful painting, which was very important for the liberation of color as expression, what do you see? A Rothko. Isn't it amazing? I'm quite sure that Rothko has seen this painting as well as the Red Studio very much, because it's the same relationship that it's not just a pink, it's not just a blue, it's not just a yellow. It's a yellow with a little bit of white. It is a blue with a little bit of pink, magenta. It is everything is in relationship, exactly giving us this sense of scale that we were talking about,
Yes, there's something else about Matisse, because although we vowed last night over dinner that these would be 2 happy days and there would be no talk of tragedy, we can't get away from it, because Rothko very early on, certainly by the time he was writing a book around 1940, he'd already been deep into a very influential and extraordinary book, with Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy.
Yes.
Die Geburtstragödie aus der Geist der Musik, from the spirit of music. And the tragic, we can't get away from it, Marco. It's a lovely time here, and it's a great celebratory event, and everything's fine, and even the weather's good. But tragedy is always there as a kind of vein, a load vein running through life. And Rothko said that all art is preoccupied with mortality. And even at his brightest, Rothko has a sense of the tragic about him. And I remember Christopher Rothko talking in Vienna and writing in the catalogue, and in an earlier book he did on his father, Mozart, and he has wonderful expression of smiling through tears. And there are paintings by Rothko where the blurred quality sense of hazy edges, it instantly reminds me of how you see the world. And I'm a very emotional person. When you're on the brink of brimming with tears, but not quite crying, and you get this full quality, it's a fullness of emotion. And fullness is a very interesting thing. And I never thought of this until I started talking now, but Rothko liked very full paintings, and they're full, not just of colour, but with a sense of plenitude of emotion. And Newman said the same thing, and he liked the fullness. He said, I'm not concerned with colour, I'm concerned with the fullness thereof. And it's about the way that colour can fill space, and in filling space, it fills human perception. And this to me is what Matisse is about. And then some of Matisse's works, they're remarkably sombre, you know. They're not just the joy of life. There's some very, very intense paintings by Matisse, who above all, and I think this is going to come back to one of your ideas soon, black. Because Matisse had a way of using black
as color,
which was absolutely as color,
unique
color,
as color, not as shadow, as color.
Totally,
Yes.
totally.
And what is so you're talking about the relationship between color and music, and look at this painting. People are dancing. If people are dancing, it's because there is some music in it. You know, we imagine that music is inside this joie de vivre. And what is so important is also that at that time Matisse was very impressed by the Persian paintings, and you can see that the line is not shaping the forms. So you can see already the color fields and the lines are like playing together in a game, separated in getting together again, as always as a play, that never will be completed,
And Matisse was also a master of line.
Yes,
The
yes.
arabesque.
Yes,
The
yes.
sinuous line, which literally joins colours and
Yes.
forms.
At Matisse's chapel.
In Vons, some form of Vons. Yes, it's about relate cutouts of decoupage.
Exactly.
They're about literally drawing with colour, because he's
Exactly.
cutting out coloured paper.
Cutouts.
So he's literally cutting into the colour.
Exactly.
But Marco,
Yes?
tell me more about your art. That's what I want to see.
Well, images, it's exactly like when we're talking about Matisse. I always loved this painting, Porte, Fenêtre, la Coulure, because it is about a window. And since the Renaissance period, that painting was related to the idea of being a kind of a window. Finestra dell'anima, how Leonardo da Vinci described it. And this is amazing window in this way is closed. And there was a beautiful, do you know this writing of Baudelaire, Le Splendide de Paris, when he says something beautiful about windows. When they are closed, you get they are so much more interesting than they were open, because then you look at yourself,
And that's great. And I've got a brainwave. Bernard, I think, famously said that the most beautiful things in a museum are the windows. You know that quote?
No?
Bernard? He said the most beautiful things in a museum are windows. That's rather fascinating, actually.
Yeah. And so this is my first painting that I consider to be, reasonable at least. I'm kind of honestly ashamed. Who am I to be so close to maybe the best painters of the 20th century? I don't to be pretentious. I just want to show you that how they were important in my career as an artist. And so I made this painting using iron and pigment. And it's amazing. They have a relationship with the window.
But is it
close
oil
a
or acrylic?
window. Huh?
Oil or acrylic?
No, it's not. It's an iron.
Oh, I see.
It's a piece of iron.
Because I never saw these.
Yeah, because it's a piece of iron and a pigment with glue.
Oh, I see.
So
Like
it has the materiality that you cannot see right away. But you can see right away how much I was influenced. This was made in 1986, so you can see how old am I.
Wow.
And this was my first big show at the Museum of Art of São Paulo. And I was also influenced by a great artist, Brazilian artist called Alfredo Volpi. It took me about a whole year to convince my friend that Volpi is a good artist. And I believe he's having a retrospective at Tate. And finally, you do agree, right?
Well, it's funny because when I first saw Volpi, he was not really known outside Brazil at all. But Tate had a show, and they come there, kind of iconic artists. And then you actually, I'm grateful because you won me over to Volpi. And when I look at Volpi now, do you know what I think? The Brazilian Milton Avery. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Well, he's better than Avery.
Yeah, maybe. But Mark
What did they call the relationships?
Volpi, yeah. But Volpi was Italian immigrant.
He was born in Lucca, the same city as, in Italy, every name comes from a city. So my name, Giannotti, comes from Lucca as well.
Right, I see.
So it's funny. And you can see right away how Volpi was influenced by Albers.
Yes, fascinating.
And also Anna Mariani was a very nice photographer. And it's amazing how this is a very popular houses in Brazil, the north of Brazil. And they, very, poor people.
Was he self-taught?
What? Volpi? Yes. He was self-taught.
That's also interesting.
Yes,
too.
yes.
Because that leads me to remember in the 1930s, Rothko was teaching children at the Brooklyn Academy. And what he loved about the potential for children's art was its spontaneity. Before we'd had our ideas drummed into us at school and all that.
But also, but at the same time, he was a great technician, and he started as a young painter to work on frescoes at the Avenida Paulista for the rich people, making like decoration. And that's very interesting. When we talk about color, you have to have a real good technique. And Volpi was using tempera, which is not oil painting. Is a technique that demands a lot of care because you have to use eggs, and if you're not careful enough, you have a lot of trouble of using this organic material. And again, we come to Rothko. Rothko was also well known for his particular way of mixing eggs with
This is absolutely fascinating because traditionally it's only the egg white that's used.
Exactly.
And as far as I can recall, Rothko mixed whole eggs.
Exactly.
Which made for a fatter pigment.
Exactly.
But it also reminds me that 2 weeks ago I was in Naples for the opening of a show of an Italian artist who's really a tremendous colorist, still alive, Pier Paolo Calzolari. Now I wanted to show some Calzolaris, but the relevance here is that Calzolari works in his paintings and installations, as he also does, but he works in his paintings with what he calls fat tempera. And it's
oil.
Yeah, oil, yes.
Exactly.
Venetian pigments, so on, like that. And then that's a good marker, we just got Venice. Brilliant.
And that's very interesting because you see at the center, this was a painting that Volpi has done when he went back to Italy. he came to Brazil when he was 3 years old as an immigrant, and only 47 years later that he had a chance to go back to Italy. And then it's fascinating because this oil painting is very traditional, you know. And after that, after this voyage, and I was teaching at Venice 2 years ago at Ca' Foscari University, and I was, you know, for a month there, and it was just, you know, because of this, you know, experience of being there for a month, not as a tourist, but in a way living the city, that I really discovered how much Volpi was influenced by, you know, Venice. And that's very interesting because Venice is not the town of perspective. We call the city of perspective. The first experience was by Brunelleschi in 1417 at Florence, right? And the biggest colorists, they all went to Venice. Turner, Monet. Venice was always the big city of color because, you know, because of the water, because of the reflections, and you don't have the capacity of looking far away. So you have, you know, color reflecting all over the place, you know. And also you have this, you know.
And of course, Rothko showed in Venice too. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was 58. I think. Oh, what is this? What's going on?
My red studio. This is fascinating because this cinema place was a place abandoned, and it was a project to by art to start to give life again to a place that was a ruin. And of course, I was very much influenced by the Red Studio, and so I decided to make this installation. But it might give you the impression that I was using light. No, but in fact I was using pigment. And I used so much pigment that, you know, for like a month. And I would go to get a shower, and I would transpire color. I mean, I might get a cancer because of that, cadmium red, you know. And also the idea of a window that is not open, it's closed, you see.
Well, I began to see that there's this very interesting dialectic between the window and the wall.
Exactly. Yeah. What is what, right? Yeah, exactly. And as you notice, yes, this is I mean, for every painter, and also, well, for Rothko, I love this when he said that to Mel, that everything that he has was due to the fact that he was, for many years, looking at this very, very important painting, because this is the first time that really, in modern painting, color becomes as important, more important than the line. See, the atmosphere, the space, is done by color. If you get a black and white reproduction of this painting, you don't get, you can understand nothing of it. You see.
The downstairs, where the centre's very lucky to have more loans of paintings, there's a big red painting, 64. And it's where Rothko is developing the hard-edged forms, which will ultimately become the black, so-called black forms, which dominate the so-called murals in the Rothko chapel. But there, early on, he's actually doing it in red, with a single hard-edged brown, maroon rectangle and a red field. So he's moving from red, and here you go again, back onto black in the chapel. Exactly. It's a very deep purple.
And then there is this very interesting installation of a very well-known Brazilian artist called Cildo Meirelles. And you have to know that this was done in 1967. And of course, it is related to Matisse. But also you have to think that at this period, we are passing Brazil into in a very dark period of dictatorship. So then red has also this tragic sense of death and so on. And talking about red, you know, there is a very strong story about this red, because this is one of my favorite paintings, as well as Rothko. There is a description when Rothko saw this painting at Pompeii. He was fascinated by these frescoes, and studying this fresco, I discovered that the red, where does it come from? As a matter of fact, this red comes from Almadén in Spain, in a mine of mercury, so that the slaves, they were, getting up this pigment, and they would, just survive at most 3 months.
That's right.
Because mercury, as you may know, is very dangerous to health. And even though the Romans were, picking up this red in order to make paintings like that. So there is also this, we come again to this tragic feeling that you can see. And this Villa of the Mysteries is a very interesting painting, because you don't know exactly what it's about. You have some Dionysian feature of this Donna, this woman, introduced into a kind of a, you might see Baco and offering wine to her, so that she can, in a way, go into another atmospheres.
And Rothko loved Italy. And what's interesting about these frescoes, and there's others at Boscoriale as well, it's in the Met, is the way that the figures are in a constant interplay with a field of red. And Rothko felt that the figures in his earlier works, like the subway paintings, they hadn't disappeared, but they've been transformed into presences. And it's just, again, it's this interplay between something sentient, conscious and present, and also the all-pervasive power of colour, which clearly goes back a long time in human history, And even you think about some of the oldest paintings, works in Altamira in Spain, those early pigments are red earth.
Yes, exactly.
So it's literally the earth itself almost. And I'm thinking of a name I was warned not to mention, but I can't not mention it. Clifford Still, who was for a short while, no more than 6 years, very close to Rothko, but they broke, and still broke with everyone anyway, But Still's palette comes out of the earth. Quite literally, he has, a whole range of earth colours, like burnt umber, raw sienna, all of those colours. Red is the earth.
Exactly.
And it's the Clifford Still Museum is in Colorado, Denver. And Colorado means
color.
Yeah, well, colour. Red.
Yes.
Red,
Colorado.
Red's fundamental.
Yes. Red is blood.
But even before the play, I don't know if you saw the famous play, well, it's famous now, a play called Red, and it was about Mark Rothko, in his final years, and the idea which you just call the play Red is rather interesting. Red has become associated with Rothko, although you have many more colours on which you could play, and the tremendous virtuosity of Rothko was that there wasn't a single colour within the spectrum that he couldn't in some way use or manipulate. But what's the next slide? Yeah.
I just want to say something, that red and green, they're complementary. And it's fascinating that the Romans, in a way, they knew how to do it, And one of these fascinating paintings of Rothko is that, because when you mix red and green, what do you get? Green, right? But Rothko could do it in a way that you can see red, and behind the red, a green. This is something very, very difficult to do. It seems to be simple, but it demands a lot of technique. This is one of the most difficult things. To mix colors in such a way that they not become gray or black. And this is I do not like to talk about myself very much. It's gonna go by. This is a show that I made that I also was influenced by this experience of going to Italy and having the experience of looking at temples. And I love, a friend of mine once said to me, what is the meaning of contemplation? We talk about a lot about this word, and as a matter of fact, contemplation means contemplare, with his contemplo. It means that augur, the man who predicts the future, looks through the measures of the temple in order to predict the future by the way the birds would fly. If
Yes.
if you would be in nature, you could not have the measure to realize the real, the way that the birds were flying. But with the temple, with the geometry, right? You can start to measure how nature behaves.
Well, this is leading me to two thoughts. One is that Greek architecture was about nothing if not about measure. And everyone knows that the Parthenon is literally constructed down to almost minute sizes and measures. And the entasis of the columns, the actual base of the Parthenon is not flat, it's slightly curved.
Exactly.
In order to correct for the optical perspective effects and all of that. And the other thing I'm thinking about is in the early Renaissance, north of the Alps, religious pictures were described, there's a word for the religious picture in German, Andachtsbilder, painting for thinking on, for contemplating on, Andachtsbilder, like, Dürer's trinities and things like that. And I've got an even more material but frivolous thoughts as we're on the Italian front now. Italian sweet wines? Those lovely Italian sweet wines you have at the end with the biscotti. And they're vini di meditazione, the wines from meditation, you see. And maybe Mark enjoyed that side of it too.
And there is this wonderful experience that when Rothko was in Paestum,
yes.
and somebody asked him,
the boy is supposed to
he said that I've been painting this all my life, right?
Temples all my life, interesting.
Because Schopenhauer once said a nice thing about what is a temple. A temple is also the occasion of light to manifest itself, you see? That's why the columns, they're not equal. They are cut into a way that you have the refraction of light.
And the point about the classical Greek architecture is also very much about light and shadow.
Exactly.
Presence and tablatures, columns,
and also
shadow within.
And the secretiveness of something, of a light coming from behind, right?
But
yes.
the downside to this is what the heck those temples must have looked like originally. Because they were totally painted.
Yes.
It must have been almost like a kitsch effect almost. It must have been amazing in a way. Some polychrome blues and reds and things like that. And I wonder, I wouldn't love them so much if they were painted in bright colours. It's the beauty of
If they're so good, they should have had great painters. And they had if you look at the Greek vases, or even there is a very beautiful example of a band, Tumba del Tuffatore, a man jumping into the void. They has If they were so good architects, I believe they were also very good painters.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, and therefore we go to this idea of making a place. This is something very important in Rothko's utmost projects, the Seagrams and also the chapel. And I try in my small scale to do it here when I use the green at the walls and try to dimmer the light so that you don't see. I was talking to my dear friend Jane, Jane told me how she loves the white cube. And I think, wow, it's a great experience. But when I use color in a space, what I try to do is to give the sense of an ambience, kind of something that is not a place where you put one picture after the other, but I try to make a relationship between the painting and the space. And of course, this was very, very important for Rothko. And there is this beautiful expression that Nora Ashton said.
Well,
first,
the key thing about the Rothko Chapel in Houston, where it marks an almost seismic watershed in Western art since the Renaissance, is that is where Rothko moves from painting to place to environmental space. And that really is like a kind of Rubicon, and once he crossed that, he was going beyond painting.
Yes.
And at one point, Rothko said, "I have made a place, not a gallery, not a wall." He wanted his paintings to defeat the walls. The paintings would become their own presence. And the idea of making a place, it has very, very ancient religious associations, and certainly in the Hebrew religion, the idea of place, makom, the place, and Kabbalistic thought. I mean, if Rothko was maybe not conventionally religious, he was certainly saturated with memories of an ancient and great religious tradition and culture. And the idea of making the place, it's a sacred thing. I mean, churches, chapels, temples, they're places.
Where you have a different experience than ordinary life, This was a show that I made in Rio de Janeiro, and I was very much influenced by also a great Italian printmaker. He's called Piranesi, and I love when he talked to me about Escher. Piranesi is my goal, my friend.
Marco, I take great pleasure in being a gap and provoking you. And when I came and stayed with you in December 2016 and January 2017. I felt I had to criticise your work because, you see, what's good in an artist's work is taken for granted. It's really going at the critical aspect.
Yes, of course.
Which are being, called, as we say in English, being called to be kind. And now when I asked you, well, what are you going to paint for Darga Pearls? And you sent me a few images, and I said, well, where are you going? And he's going towards this very interesting idea of perspective within colour.
Exactly.
Tell me about it, Marco, because we never really discussed it.
There is always this idea of dealing with color and drawing, and in all my life, and also this idea of also the contradiction between nature and culture. If you think about Lascaux, Lascaux was a natural place, but because it was painted, it became the first architecture. And there was a beautiful text of Bataille who says that, it was a burial place. So maybe people started to paint because they started to believe, to know that they would die. and therefore they would paint in order to maintain the image of the spirit, not only for the everyday life, but for the afterlife, you know.
What's going on up there?
Yeah, this is some photos of industry in Brazil. It's very polluted, but at the same time, it is inside, not at the rainforest, but inside a huge forest. And then you have this kind of industry. So you have this amazing impression of being inside of a kind of a hell, you know. And yeah, let's go on, right? So talking about church, once I tried to make an experience of making an installation using the photos are not very good, but I used 3 triangles, and the show was called Trinity. It was very funny because at the beginning, of course, I was discussing the idea of, in Christian religions, you might use figures to inspire you to go to another place, to think about paradise. But in Orthodox, when you think about the icons and the Jewish tradition, then you're not allowed to use images, right? So what was so funny was at the beginning the priest was very happy with my paintings, but after a month he was really, disgusted because he was believing that I was a kind of not really a Christian, but a part of Yves Klein, all this very tradition of a religious cross tradition of the old traditional ways of believing,
But
old religions,
You're not religious, so
when I paint.
When you pass. Yes, yeah.
Baptiste said that when he paints, I get religious.
Yeah.
The same thing, Rothko.
To music, I get religious.
Yes.
But you think about religion. There's very few religions on earth which don't have almost archetypal symbols of light and darkness, above and below. I mean, it's not just Christian, the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Byzantine tradition, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, light and colour. Brilliant point, because don't forget the Malevich wanted this black square up in the traditional Russian site, in the corner, up
exactly.
top of the world. Yes.
The same. He used it, and the Russians they were able to go to abstraction so rapidly because they did not pass through the Renaissance experience of realism, So they went right away from iconic images, which are abstract and idealistic, to a very much abstract painting, It was easy for them because they did not have the burden of all the academic tradition of realism, Am I right, my dear friend?
With the death of religion in the 19th century, as the world became more secularized, capitalism went its way, it was often amazing. Art became a surrogate religion, and a lot of art, and especially of abstract art, is a kind of surrogate theology.
Exactly.
And again, a name I must not mention, Clifford, but in the 1940s, he said to one of his students at the California School of Fine Arts, the artist will replace a priest, which is quite interesting. I put this in because it was a very moving experience for me to curate this very large show at the Royal Academy in London in 2016. And the Royal Academy it's beautiful architecture. You see, it's almost like a Brunelleschian portal there. And at the centre of the Royal Academy, which if you haven't been, it's a pretty big building. is an octagon, and I thought the moment I stood there long before the show was finalised and got the lounge, I thought this has to be the Rothko space. And I'm incredibly grateful to those who lent some of the paintings. And I have to say, I think it was absolutely bloody marvellous. It was just incredibly good. And you saw what I tried to do there, Marco, was to show the range of Rothko. You see, he could master this sort of sea blue, nocturnal blue, and a terrific painting which was also in Vienna, the 1960 Painting Centre to the right, and then a much more denser kind of painting there on the left, and then that's absolutely sublime. I mean, only Rothko could make
pink and red.
Pink and lime. I mean, it's to be very debunking. It's the colours of Neapolitan ice cream. But here they're raised to a level of visual poetry and eloquence, and just standing there for me was just a fantastic experience. And I think I didn't see anyone crying, but I think they were very moved.
You don't see
very moving
in Rothko. You never see a pure color. It's always a color like a Proust that remembers another color, right? Something that comes from experience of time.
The colours move in memory.
Yes, yes. Back to your friends?
Well, I felt if we couldn't put them in the same room. Clifford wouldn't allow any of his paintings from Denver to be shown in the same room. But what was very lucky to be able to do was with the Rothko octagon in the centre, the side room to the east, we could devote wholly to Clifford Still. And for once we were able to look at both Still and Rothko, and I'm passionate about both artists. I'm not partisan. The battles of the 1940s and 50s, I mean, they're all over now, and I think we're in a position where we can at least just appreciate the very, very different greatness of these two artists. I mean, they're chalk and cheese, The handling of colour by Rothko was incredibly powerful, and so was Still on that work on the left. It's actually an incandescent painting. So, Rothko Still, Giannotti.
Who am I? I'm just a painter.
Not quite, but you're nearly there. It's just fascinating to see how colour is so many-sided. And even if Rothko didn't use the term multiform, and I researched it actually, because of the multiforms, and there's one downstairs, which he begins when he pulverises the figures in 1946. And for the next 4 years to 50, he does the multiforms. It was thought that the multiform was a title given by his last dealers, Marble Gallery. But I don't know, he may have said something about it, because the word multiform, I checked it out. Do you know it occurs in Milton's Paradise Lost? Multiform? And no matter what its history is, its provenance, the many-sided aspects of colour, the multiform nature of colour, what you can do with colour is absolutely endless. And, delayed at Gatwick for 8 hours on Wednesday to Tuesday night. I was reading this book, it's a very good book, it's not by me, it's a good book. And I knew the author, he was a very nice man, he was a world expert on colour, but at the end of it, and we've had these discussions, you could talk yourself blue in the face, you can write tones on colour like Goethe did with the Farbenlehre, and then the great English scientist Isaac Newton did with colour and optics, but it comes back to something very important about colour. Everyone can feel colour. You cannot not feel it, assuming you're not blind or colour blind, but you cannot say what it is. You could give 1,000 names to it, but they're just names, and colour transcends actual description. And this is what, and it's something I want to talk to you about, but not now. Do you know Ludwig Wittgenstein's book on colour?
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yes,
He's exploring the linguistic aspect,
of course,
but also the imponderable mystery of colour, which is bottomless. Yeah.
This is a painting, a big one, that I was dealing with the. I made a kind of a game because oleoductus is ducts of oil, but in a way is I'm referring to painting because our painting is always a way of to transfer matter from one place to another. This was a show that I made at Pinacoteca.
What is this series called?
Passages.
Right.
Yeah. And then we come, this is so funny. We have seen all these images, and the real name of this lecture is related to this painting. And as a matter of fact, my work, Rothko's work, Matisse's work are quite the opposite of it. We try not to believe that there is such a thing as an ideal blue, an ideal yellow. Of course, I know that Newman at that time was criticizing if this would be possible. But as a matter of fact, he was trying to use what we say pure colors, and as a matter of fact, they do not exist, only in our mind. Right?
Yes, and somewhere in Newman's writings, I mean, Newman was a very good writer, and at the time in the 1950s, people didn't see Newman as a painter. He was seen as the theoretician and the advocate of abstract abex. But he suffered in that respect. But in retrospect, his actual writings tell us a lot about colour.
Of course.
And there's one essay where he says a painting can have lots of colours but no colour. And what exactly he meant by that? Go on. Well, think of
this idea, when you get to the end, and that's a problem, when you try to go beyond our ordinary experiences and try to get to the idea of a color, then you're lost. And that's why Rodchenko said that this would be the ultimate painting, because if you go to the basic fact that painting is just surface and color, then painting is dead. So there is no way out, So we have to come back.
Well, the great discovery of modernist art in the 20th century is the monochrome.
And this is the end of art, in a way. We have to come back. We cannot go beyond the monochrome.
You can't go beyond the monochrome, and this is where I'm going to use a difficult word. I don't know what people's are coping with our English, or my British English and your Brazilian English is very good. But the word eschatological. It's a science of endings, a study of endings, eschatology.
Yeah.
But
think about Rothko's chapel. When Rothko becomes monochromatic, there is no future.
Well, this is the essence of it, because I was very lucky when I was at the court order in another century to have as my teacher a very remarkable man called John Golding. And John Golding wrote what is still the classic text on Cubism. It's still a great book in 1959. It's never been surpassed. But John himself was also a curator and a painter, and to take us back, to quote Lear, to bring a wheel full circle, John Golding curated a magnificent show, Matisse Picasso, which there was at the Tate, and it went to MoMA in New York, when MoMA was temporarily out in Queens. I don't know if you saw the show, but the dialogue over the decades that he managed to set up between Matisse and Picasso was incredibly intriguing. And at times, Matisse comes out as almost expressionist, and at other times Picasso comes out as almost lofty and colorist. And he manages to reverse all of this. But the monochromes, I know, we're back to Raphael. Why Raphael? Go back a moment. We've got 5 minutes left.
The problem, I have to apologize, we're such good friends that we could talk for hours here. So I'm gonna Let's talk about Raphael. This is honestly one of my favorite paintings. This idea of always having this idea of a light that is covered and uncovered. There's the shining, the discovery of the spirit as color. There's a beautiful expression. We're gonna stop it soon. There is a beautiful expression that Goethe says about color. In German it says, "Die Farben sind Taten und Leiden des Lichtes," which means the color are actions and passions of light. So color always comes out of shadow. Without shadow, if you have total light, then you don't have color. See, so color is always a degree of shadow. And I think Raphael was brilliant, with using this much before Caravaggio.
Well, it is. The first person to use, and don't forget, Rothko said the dark painting began in 1957. And there are bright paintings after 57, but it takes on a different quality. And the nocturne, penumbral painting, that starts, Marco, with who?
What?
In the Renaissance. Who's the first person to do a night scene?
A night scene, Leonardo? No. Before? No, wait. Piero Francesca.
You have this scene. Well, I just want to end up. Go back a second. Go back.
They're tired of us.
I know that. They've got 4 more. Well, actually, they've got 5 minutes to stay awake. Go back. I've been. Station across. Yeah.
No, what did I do?
Well, I was looking at your work, but just go on a bit more.
Back?
Yeah, no, forward. Forward march.
We shall finish, my friend.
Well, it's just
talk about
back.
They're tired. Talk about this painting.
I want to go back to something. Back.
What?
Back. Yes, there. It's I didn't want to get stuck with Rothko all my life, but I did want to get stuck with something we have in common to take us back to the beginning, and that's colour. And the artists I've been working on recently, the only thing they've had in common is colour. And I was in Milan and Rome 3 weeks ago to look at works from the estate of Piero D'Orazio, who was a very interesting man. He actually met Rothko, he met Pollock, he went to New York in 1954, he corresponded with Frankenthaler, Anthony Caro and all that, and they started to bring these works out of a Rome warehouse, and D'Orazio was an amazing range of ways of dealing with colour. And I think this is it before Frank Stella does his paintings, I don't know what to call them.
Already? When was it done?
This, I think it's 50s, late 50s,
really?
I think.
Amazing.
And they brought it out. I think it's just absolutely amazing. And let's take a look at the next one and we'll wind up. And a month ago, I curated a show in Baku, in Azerbaijan. Wonderful place, absolutely wonderful place. Wonderful people, wonderful weather, wonderful food, wonderful, beautiful city. And the artist was a New York artist, Stanley Castleman. And it's very interesting handling of colour, because what he's started to do is to chrome his paintings. He sends them off to a factory and they're covered with silver nitrate. Mm-hmm. But and what you see on the left, now go back a second, what you see on the left is what's underneath the chrome. He's peeled it away, and the paintings are painted from the back. They're silk screens and he paints them from the back because he says he likes the unpredictability of what will come out on the front. So go to the next one, and you see this is, that's it. Go back one more. Titian. This late Titian, I've seen this painting in 5 different locations in the world. And it's just amazing because this idea of peeling away the surface of the painting, that's what Castleman does. It almost, as Frank Stella talks about this in a wonderful book he wrote called Working Space, masters being flayed alive. It's late, there's no colour, it's quite relatively dark and subdued, but there's colour everywhere. And it's got that atmospheric quality which you'll get in.
And you know why?
Why?
Something very interesting that we could finish our conversation here.
On the last one.
No, wait. Why Martius was put in this condition? Because he pretended to play music better than Pan. You see? And then he was sacrificed because he wanted to be a better musician than God.
It's very nature.
Yes.
It's very nature. Last one.
Okay.
And Christmas 2017. And I wanted this to be informal because I spent the Christmas of, after Christmas of 2016 with you, Mark, in Brazil. In Sao Paulo, my partner of 40 years had just died. And, it was a terrible time. And so the consolation was art. And it was Nietzsche who said, we have art so as not to die of the truth. And that's really fascinating. And then the following Christmas of 2017, I was, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam was open on Christmas Day. So I went in there and I went past all the great big set pieces, the Night Watch and the great big Franz House, group portraits, and even a Vermeer, which you love. And I was in a little side room and I suddenly saw this painting. Couldn't think of the artist, and I had to think back. And this was a painting of late 17th century Dutch still life artist Adrian Court. And suddenly this painting, this extraordinary modern painting of four peaches on this black background, and look at the rectilinear element marker, the stone tablet upon which they are. And I thought to myself, well, it's not modern art, and it's not pre-modern art, it's just one continuous tradition of art. And what the old masters were trying to do is no different to what Rothko was trying to do. You just change forms. And the Rothko show in Vienna, which closed last month, it makes all those connections with Rothko, the art of the past, with Rembrandt, with Titian, Angelico, the Greek temples. And I look at a painting like that, and that almost moved me to tears with simplicity. And I thought, look at that, and then look at the last image. Different painting.